All right, you guys, we did it. This is the end. We got the diesel emissions regulations deregulated today, all the way back to 2023. Crazy, huh? All right. HJRES 89, it passed the House floor today. What does that mean, you might ask? That's the Omnibus Low NOx Rule. And what confused the heck out of me was this bill was retroactive to 2024, even though it was, or it became a rule or an order in late of 2024, which that part just puzzled me, baffled me. Before we get too far into this video, please hit that like button right now, hit the subscribe button and the ring bell. Check out the video library for helpful videos and a lot of maintenance stuff. Go check that out before you go. Now, what happened today is, in the short end of everything, HJRES 89 got passed. It's going to go onto the Senate floor and probably get signed and then probably go to court for a very long time. But what does this do? Can you run out and go start deleting your diesels, cut off your catalytic converters, take off your DEF, take off your EGR, take off particulate filters? Let's go out and there, just rip that stuff off because there's going to be no more CARB, no more smog, right? No, don't do it. What is very surprising to me, if you look up federal emissions tier 4 standards, go look that up. Just Google, does federal emissions tier 4 standards require DEF or require particulate filters? You're going to be amazed to what you find. The rules that this is going to actually cut back, I really don't understand, because it's pretty much with this Omnibus Low NOx Rule being deregulated, it just means that the future trucks that are going to be built don't need more and more emissions equipment to meet the low NOx standards. Watch this whole video, please. But as it is right now, if this rule goes away, we're going back to 2023 standards, whatever was happening then. But then again, if you look at tier 4 emissions by the feds, really, what is going to change out of this whole thing? It's crazy. This is it feels like a complete waste of time when you start looking at everything when it comes to HJRES 89. All right, I'm rambling on way too much. Let's get on into this long AF video, and please, while you're watching, comment below, let me know your take, what you're thinking, and absorb it all in. If you see anything that says smogs are going to end in California, CARB's going away, anything like that, please comment below. Let's get into this video.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 354, I call up House Joint Resolution 89 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 89, Joint Resolution providing congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to California State Motor Vehicle and Engine and Non-Road Engine Pollution Control Standards, the Omnibus Low NOx Regulation, Waiver of Preemption, Notice of Decision.
Pursuant to House Resolution 354, the joint resolution is considered read. The joint resolution shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Proponent, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the legislation and to insert extraneous material on HJRES 89.
Without objection. The
Madam
gentleman
Speaker,
from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, today I rise in strong support of HJRES 89, a resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to California State Motor Vehicle and Engine Non-Road Engine Pollution Control Standards, the Omnibus Low NOx Regulation, Waiver of Preemption, Notice of Decision, sponsored by the gentleman from California. Gentleman from California's resolution would repeal the EPA decision to grant a waiver to the California Air Resources Board rule on heavy-duty engine emissions of nitrogen oxides, or NOx. Now, I think it's interesting to point out here because Mr. Kiley, the gentleman from California, previously has pointed out in the debate on the previous two bills that these rules were approved by a non-elected body in Washington, D.C. for a waiver to a non-elected body in the state of California. So it is interesting that this is a waiver granted not to the legislature even of California, but to the California Air Resources Board. This standard, believe it or not, of the three California regulations we're discussing today, has probably the toughest timeline of compliance. Now, Madam Speaker, you have to pay close attention because at first I thought my team had made an error. This rule would require a 75% NOx reduction beginning with model year 2024. Now, you say, wait, how can that be? This is 2025. Well, that's a good question, and a lot of people are asking that question, and manufacturers are having to think maybe we've got to do something to be ready for retroactive action. Now, if we were passing something, I'm not sure we could do it retroactive in this nature. Maybe we could. But now we're going to have unelected bureaucrats on top of unelected bureaucrats affecting a regulation passed originally by Congress and authorized by Congress, and now a regulation waiving a regulation on another regulation. Doesn't seem right. Because the EPA has not yet granted the waiver when the rule was made, there was already some uncertainty in the marketplace because of concerns with that retroactive enforcement that I just mentioned. This rule would require, oh, but wait, it's like the old Ronco commercials. But wait, Madam Speaker, there's more. This rule would require a 90% reduction in NOx from diesel engines beginning with model 2027 engines. You think they're already getting those in production? I think they probably are, Madam Speaker. I think they're already working on it, and now, before it has even become the law of the land through a waiver of a regulation on a regulation, we have a 90% reduction in NOx being required. A 90% reduction from current federal emission standards in 2027. Did I say that yet? I believe I did. This is California coming over top. This California regulation is coming over top of federal regulators in an effort to truly vilify diesel engines. Some diesel engine manufacturers will have compliance concerns and already do. And they may end up having to purchase NOx credits from electric vehicle manufacturers. They may have to purchase credits. Now, that credit is a federal credit. The emissions credit trading system adds another layer of complexity to the compliance and shows how difficult it can be to marry up the federal standards with these new California standards. It is essentially allowing some federal credits to be transferred to the California pool depending on vehicle sales in California. Confusing, convoluted, and hard to follow. You bet it is. Another burden that manufacturers will have to account for are extended engine warranties and new testing procedures that will inevitably have some cost that will have to be borne by fleet operators who purchase the trucks and by consumers who will have to pay more in freight costs for everyday goods. We've already seen lower truck sales in California, and as expected and previously predicted by one of our earlier speakers, increased purchase prices. Briefly, I'd like to address the Congressional Resolution of Disapproval process. And we've heard a lot today about all of this. And I would submit to you that Congress under Article 1 should deal with repealing regulations, particularly when that regulation has significant impact and is controversial, as this one is. In the end, it is the House that covered, the EPA transmitted the California waiver notices of decision on the regulations in February. The notice was published in the Federal Register. The public was allowed to request a hearing and submit materials for the record. It is a rulemaking process on a rule and regulation, no matter what others may choose to call it. Madam Speaker, they can call it whatever they want to. I know what it is, and it is the waiver of a regulation by the federal government in order to give power to a regulation in California. They can call it a notice of decision. They can call it the epizootie if they want to. Call it anything they want. We all know what it is. It's a regulation. And to paraphrase Shakespeare, a rose by any other name still smells the same. And as accordingly, I would submit to you that we have jurisdiction, and I would submit further, Madam Speaker, that while CRAs can't be reviewed by the courts when this passes, and I think it will, notwithstanding outside objectors, CRAs technically can't be reviewed by the courts. It will be interesting to see when it gets to the Supreme Court, because I believe the Supreme Court will agree with me. Regulators can call it whatever they want to, but when you're waiving regulations and allowing other regulations to take their place, that is subject to the Congressional Review Act and this process we're doing today. And I urge all members to join me in voting in favor of my friend from California's resolution of disapproval, HJRES 89. And even if you're not 100% in agreement, you ought to do it so that we can preserve the power of Congress, because if not, we should dissolve and let California run everything. Or perhaps my colleagues would like us to dissolve and make all decisions the subject of the Government Accountability Office instead of the elected members of the United States Congress. I ask everyone to vote yes on HJRES 89. I thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserved. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to HJRES 89, yet another extremist and I believe illegal Congressional Review Act resolution attacking a common-sense regulation to protect Americans' health and the environment. Now, HJRES 89 would block the California waiver for the heavy-duty Omnibus rule that sets stronger standards to lower nitrogen oxide and particulate matter emissions from heavy-duty engines. The trucking industry makes up just 10% of vehicles on the road, but 45% of nitrogen oxide and 56% of particulate matter pollution. Nitrogen oxide is a precursor for smog that can exacerbate numerous health conditions and is associated with premature death. And people who live near ports, highways, and warehouses are disproportionately exposed to high concentrations of this pollution. Now, the California standard aims to address this pollution and reverse course on these deadly trends. This is based on California's unique circumstances. They have an air pollution problem that's a lot worse than many of the other states. And despite Republicans' false claims, the California program does not ban internal combustion engine trucks. Maintaining the California program is critical to improve public health outcomes and secure the right to clean air for everyone. Repealing California's federal preemption waiver for its heavy-duty omnibus plan will rob Americans of over $23 billion in health benefits through 2050 and increase premature mortality, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits. This resolution is a waste of our time because, as I've said on the other two, both the GAO and the Senate parliamentarian have concluded that this waiver is not a rule and therefore cannot be revoked using the Congressional Review Act. So just another attempt by the Republicans to distract from the economic chaos and uncertainty that Trump is creating with our economy. This resolution is going nowhere. But for all these reasons, Madam Speaker, I oppose the resolution and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserved. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we keep hearing that, it's not a rule and it's not a regulation and that kind of stuff. And I just ask, if it's not a rule, does that mean it's not enforceable? And does that mean it can be repealed by the next administration with a click of the fingers? I don't know the answer to those questions. I just raise them. If it's not official, is it even enforceable? Because that's the argument that my colleagues would have you believe. Now, with that being said, I will yield to the gentleman from California, my colleague from the Energy and Commerce Committee Mr. Obernolte such time as he may choose to consume.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the gentleman and my friend for yielding, and I rise as the proud sponsor of this bill, HJRES 89, but also as a proud Californian. This bill would overturn the EPA's waiver granting California the ability to decide for all Californians what cars they drive and what trucks they use to deliver their goods. This waiver was granted in the waning moments of the Biden administration, and I believe it was short-sighted and misguided. To be clear, I am not an opponent of electric vehicles, and I consider myself environmentalist, but I feel strongly that my constituents ought to have the ability to buy for themselves the vehicle that will best meet their needs. And for some of them, that is an electric vehicle. For some of my delivery companies, that is an electric truck. But for some, it is not. And I believe our country was founded on the principles of freedom and liberty. And that means we are empowered to choose for ourselves about those decisions and not have our government make those decisions for us. And make no mistake, it is entirely appropriate that we are taking this action here today. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution gives this body, the United States Congress, the ability to regulate interstate commerce. And as everyone knows, these vehicles, cars and trucks, are not just manufactured for one state, the state of California. They are manufactured for a worldwide audience. It is very much interstate commerce that is at stake here. And also, let's be clear about this. If it were more efficient or less expensive to deliver using zero emissions trucks, these companies would already be doing it. But the truth is, it absolutely is not. It is more expensive. And by forcing this choice on California consumers, we will also be forcing on them all of the concomitant increases in the prices of the goods that they buy every day. And let me remind you, California already has the worst poverty of any state in the country. Madam Speaker, this waiver would have made it even worse. That's why I think it's entirely appropriate for us to be considering this action today. Also consider how nonsensical it is for us to run a system of interstate commerce where trucks deliver goods from state to state to state if we were to allow every single state in the country to establish its own emission standards for those trucks. Every one of these goods would have to stop at every single state line and be transshipped from one truck to another truck. Madam Speaker, that is ridiculous, costly, inefficient, unnecessary. I believe this body is entirely appropriate in taking this action today, and I strongly urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, HJRES 89, and the other Congressional Review actions we are taking today. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will yield now 4 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, who is the ranking member of our Environment Subcommittee.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New Jersey for yielding. I rise in opposition to this Congressional Review Act resolution. We have already heard so much debate about why the Congressional Review Act is not applicable to these waivers and why this is such an egregious attack on states' rights, so I won't belabor those points. But I will say that California developed this rule, the heavy-duty Omnibus Rule, to reduce pollution from some of the worst sources of traditional air pollution from the transportation sector. This rule does not include a sales requirement for zero-emission trucks, but it would result in diesel vehicles reducing their output of harmful NOx and particulate matter. Despite these trucks and buses being only a small fraction of vehicles on the road, they account for some 45% of NOx and 56% of fine particulate matter pollution from the transportation sector. We know that heavy-duty vehicles have a long lifespan. Vehicles sold today will still be on the roads for many, many years. Ensuring that new trucks and buses are as low polluting as possible not only reduces pollution today, but will continue to contribute to cleaning up our air for decades to follow. And I know this decision to regulate was not made lightly. The California Air Resources Board spent significant time working with truck and engine manufacturers to allow for compliance flexibilities and alignment with EPA's NOx standards. But ultimately, California's decision to pursue this rule was done for the sake of their residents that live along highways and ports that experience a disproportionate amount of pollution from truck traffic. Anyone who has spent time in neighborhoods that border these industrial sites, as I have in the south end of Albany that I represent, knows that these additional public health protections are not only warranted, but they're indeed necessary. But I am glad that California is leading the way in reducing diesel truck pollution, and we should not stop them from wanting to better protect these fence-line communities. Of course, no other state is required to adopt the California rule, but like so many other vehicle innovations, I suspect that many of our constituents, whether our states adopt the rule or not, will be able to thank California for supporting the development of new pollution control technologies that will result in all of us benefiting from cleaner and healthier air. So, Madam Speaker, I urge members to reject this resolution. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York yields. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I reserve and would advise you that I am prepared to close.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized and is, the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield now 3 minutes to 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Matsui, who is the ranking member of our Communications Subcommittee.
The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Matsui, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak in opposition to HJRES 89, which would nullify California's Low NOx Rule. My Republican colleagues will talk about the supposed EV mandate and how California is forcing the rest of the country to drive EVs. This is obviously ridiculous. California's regulations are for California. We aren't forcing anyone else to do anything. But it is especially ridiculous to call Californians Low NOx Rule an EV mandate. The Low NOx Rule for heavy-duty trucks does not mandate zero-emission vehicles. It is specifically and narrowly targeted to reduce NOx pollution, which is a primary ingredient in forming smog. Anyone who grew up in California knows the health impacts of smog. Thick clouds used to hang over our cities, burning our eyes and lungs. We've come a long way since then, thanks to our state's strong pollution regulations. But California cities still take 5 of the top 10 spots for the worst smog pollution. Smog increases the incidence of asthma and other respiratory conditions, especially among children and the elderly, and is linked to a host of other metabolic, cardiovascular, and developmental impacts. And these impacts add up. Reducing smog-forming NOx is expected to have significant health benefits for California, saving approximately $36.8 billion in avoided health costs. That's not just dollars and cents. That's thousands of lives that will be saved if this regulation goes into effect. California has long been a global leader in the fight against air pollution, recognizing early on the serious health risks posed by dirty air. For 50 years, we worked hard to protect our communities through strong, forward-thinking air pollution regulations. After establishing the first tailpipe emission standards in 1966, California established the first NOx standards in 1971, followed by the first particulate matter standards in 1982. California was also the first state to outfit vehicles with catalytic converters, a decision that transformed efforts to reduce harmful smog-forming emissions from vehicles. And the country has benefited greatly from California's leadership, not because California forced the rest of the country to follow suit, but rather because the country saw the health benefits that California has enjoyed. None of this would have been possible without California's leadership and California's authority under the Clean Air Act to set our own air pollution standards. I urge my colleagues to vote for clean air and vote no on HJRES 89. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from California yields. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized and is prepared to close.
Madam Speaker, I still have one more.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Yes. So I would yield 3 minutes now to the gentleman from California, Mr. Mullen, who's also a member of our committee.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in opposition to the Republicans' dangerous attempt to revoke California's ability to protect public health and reduce toxic vehicle emissions. The Clean Air Act is clear. California has the fundamental right to adopt vehicle emission standards that support our community's unique needs better than federal standards. This isn't new. It's been the law for more than 50 years, and the Clean Air Act has been upheld by every administration, Republican and Democrat. Now Republicans are making an extremist attack on this precedent, and it's utterly hypocritical for them to only call for states' rights when it suits them. I spent 10 years in the California legislature, and I know firsthand how critical it is for our state to be able to meet the needs of our local communities whose health and safety are at risk due to pollution. The consequences of this are real. Toxic air pollution causes asthma, heart disease, and contributes to over 100,000 deaths in America every year. We have a moral duty to protect our residents from unnecessary toxic air pollution and environmental harm. And let's be clear, this attack comes as Republicans are trying to gut Medicaid. So while they are stripping health care from millions of Americans, at the same time, they are attacking our ability to protect public health. It makes no sense. It also makes no sense to create chaos for automakers that already agreed to meet these standards with investments in domestic EV production and manufacturing that created over 200,000 new jobs and nearly $200 billion in private investment. If they really cared about reducing costs for American families, Republicans would focus on reversing Trump's reckless tariffs that are increasing car prices by up to $15,000. This is a hyper-partisan political stunt that wastes everyone's time. The Government Accountability Office has explicitly said that Congress cannot use this process to overturn California's waivers with the EPA, and we should not pretend otherwise. I urge my colleagues to reject this effort. Let's stand up for clean air, state rights, and for the health of the American people. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized and is prepared to close. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My Republican colleagues are really misleading the American people with their claims about the heavy-duty Omnibus rule. This rule actually gives California and other states the ability to clean up pollution from dirty diesel trucks, protecting the health of Americans and saving lives. Heavy-duty engines emit harmful NOx and other toxic pollutants that are significant contributors to ozone and particulate matter. The health effects of this air pollution are well documented and include respiratory illness, cardiovascular problems, and even death. Madam Speaker, the Clean Air Task Force recently issued a report showing the impacts of dirty diesel on communities. The figures are staggering, and here's just a few highlights. In 2026, dirty diesel is projected to cause nearly 500,000 lost workdays, impacting our nation's productivity, over 3,500 heart attacks, thousands of cases of respiratory illness, and yes, over 8,000 deaths. Dirty diesel will cost Americans over $90 billion in health damages. And this is what the Republicans are fighting for, resolutions that are hurting people's health and putting lives at risk. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New Jersey yields back. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this is the third of three regulations in the same vein. We've heard today about the process. We've heard today about the fact that California and those who opt in are still a minority of the states and a minority of the U.S. population, and yet they are dictating in many ways to the rest of the country because of the oversized import of the California economy, et cetera. But, you know, the bottom line is that my colleagues have said in the last few minutes that this is somehow a states' rights issue. This is not a states' rights issue. This is the creation of a super state, California. And we have the right to override the waiver granted to them that gives them outsized weight in relationship to vehicles. In this case, it's your diesel vehicles. It's your trucks. But that being said, no one state should have this much power. And the waiver should not have been granted in the first place. It is a waiver of a regulation, which makes it a regulation in effect, no matter what it's called. It's a waiver of a regulation. And therefore, it is something that the federal government, as you heard my colleague from California say, the federal government should be dictating this. It should not be granting so many waivers. We heard one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that, I forget the number of years it had been, but that California had, and I paraphrase, ratcheted these regulations on various things up over 100 times using various waivers. This was created in '67. California started down this path in '66. Congress recognized that in '67. The world is greatly different than it was in 1967. We shouldn't be allowing California to constantly ratchet up and then dictate to the rest of the states. I mean, I was just a kid back in 1967, but I was alive. The world was vastly different, even inside the United States. At that time, one state doing something didn't have the impact, the ripple effect that it has today across the country. So I think that we ought to vote yes on this resolution. I strongly encourage all of my colleagues to vote yes on HJRES 89. I think it's the right policy for all the reasons stated this entire day. And I would just have to say to you, Madam Speaker, if we don't want to see the price of trucks, the price of maintenance on trucks, the price of those trucks then carrying goods to market all over these United States, if we don't want to see that happen, we need to pass HJRES 89, stopping this inappropriate waiver by the Biden administration's EPA. And I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 354, the previous question is ordered on the joint resolution. The question is on the engrossment and third reading of the joint resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Third reading.
Joint resolution providing congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to California State Motor Vehicle and Engine and Non-Road Engine Pollution Control Standards, the Omnibus Low NOx Regulation, waiver of preemption, notice of decision.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Speaker, on that I would ask for the yeas and nays.
All right. That was pretty long, pretty repetitive from all the other House Joint Resolution debates today. Again, this one went on to a passing vote on the House floor today. So it's going to move on to the Senate, then go on to the President. All of these bills are probably going to go into court after they're signed in by the President. There's so much weird stuff going on with these joint resolutions. So I really hope this video brought some knowledge to you. And if it did, comment below. Let me know what you learned. If I need to learn something through this video or in this video, comment below. Give me a timestamp of what we're talking about. Let me get learned too. Now, if you liked this video, please hit that like button right now, please. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and hit that like button right now, please. Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies. I appreciate your time watching, and I will see you guys on the next hopefully helpful video.